And I say you have missed it. It's not anger, it's concern and worry about the deficit and that it may consume us as a nation or that it may lead to problems for our kids and our grandkids who are stuck with the bills.
Is it a case where voters really want more real people and less politicians representing them? I mean, you'll hear people all across the nation say that they are disillusioned with both parties, that they really think it's part of the same machine.
Right. There is some of that. I think that the Republican Party has a great platform. Our platform is of limited government, but I think we strayed from our platform, and when we were in charge, we doubled the debt, but now the Democrats are in charge and they've tripled the debt. So I really think that the alternative is that we have a good platform in the Republican Party. We need to elect people who will vote that way and who will adhere to an interpretation of government that is limited by the Constitution.
When we talk about that mandate that you were referring to, what should the next steps then be for the Tea Party movement?
Well, I think the Tea Party needs to get more of a defined message. I think that means right now in Kentucky we have Tea Parties based in all the different cities, but they've yet to really have a statewide convention. And I'm suggesting to them, and they're telling me they want to do this, is they're going to get together sometime this summer and have a state convention for all of the Tea Parties. I think the Tea Parties can influence both parties, but in particular I think they can have a big influence within the Republican Party.
What are the next steps for you? I mean, obviously you're going to continue campaigning, but as far as getting to Washington, as far as clinching that U.S. Senate seat, how difficult do you think this will be? And do you think that the politicians up there on the Hill might be a little bit afraid of you because you're sort of saying, hey, I don't want to play by the rules. I want to go there and shake things up. And we've seen the response has been pretty overwhelming.
I think we do want to shake things up. I don't want to be part of the good old boy system. I'm not going up there for 30 years to gain seniority to try to get more pork barrel spending. But I think we will be unified as a party, meeting with Senator McConnell and all the elected Republicans Saturday this week, and we will begin to bring people together. I mean, there have been contentious primaries for a long time in our country. I was at the first national convention that I went to was in 1976, and it was almost evenly divided between the Reagan people and the Ford people. We were Reagan people at the time, but people got together, and eventually the party became more Reagan Republicans. Now you meet people all say they're Reagan Republicans, but at one time it was very much a split party.
Let's talk about some of the issues at stake here that perhaps separate you from the rest. Your father, Congressman Ron Paul, has been very critical of the Fed. He's been at the forefront of trying to audit the Fed. What is your take on this institution, helpful or harmful?
Well, I think we need to have transparency of what goes on at the Fed. During the crisis about a year ago, the Federal Reserve bought $2 trillion worth of assets. Now, you might say, well, buying assets, that sounds good. Well, if you buy your assets out of your savings, it's good, but the Federal Reserve bought assets out of simply creating $2 trillion worth of new money. And so I think that's dangerous to our monetary system, that it could cause a devaluation or a crisis for our currency. I also think that private individuals are making money off of the transactions that the Federal Reserve is involved with, and we as taxpayers deserve to know if someone's making $100 million buying and selling U.S. assets, we need to know who they are and what they're paying for these assets. And is it being done honestly?
You've also said that few in the mainstream media are even willing to question the Fed. Why?
Yeah, and I thought it was a real problem. Like in the last presidential election, Senator McCain suspended his campaign, rushed back to Washington, but he voted the same way as Senator Obama did. They both voted for the bailouts. And so that's sort of what this is about a little bit, is we're struggling within the Republican Party to define the Republican Party. And I think the Republican Party should be, as our platform says, a party that doesn't believe in bailing out failed businesses, much less owning failed businesses.
First and foremost, you're a doctor. So for you, this whole healthcare debate, the healthcare bill, has a more personal meaning. And you have referred to the bill as socialized medicine. You use the word socialism a lot when it comes to this. Is this really the way that you feel? You think that the country is moving towards socialism?
Well, the bill will, for the first time, force people to buy insurance. And I don't think that's constitutional for the federal government to force you to buy government insurance or any kind of insurance. And so I think that's a real problem. The other problem I have is just from a fiscal point of view, that it's $1 trillion bill, and yet in the next breath they say, oh, it's not going to add anything to the deficit. Well, as I've gone around Kentucky, I don't find people who believe that $1 trillion in spending really won't add anything to the deficit. So I'm concerned about the honesty in the accounting and whether or not their predictions are accurate.
But how does the U.S. solve the problem, then, of the millions of people who are uninsured? I mean, you'll hear your critics say time and again, we're the only industrialized nation that sort of doesn't take care of the sick.
Well, I think there are ways of helping those who don't have insurance. I think allowing importation of drugs or re-importation of drugs across country lines would be good for our country. I think allowing selling of insurance across state lines would help with competition. And I also think that health insurance should be made more like term life insurance, where the policies are many-year policies. So if you get sick, they won't deny you because you have a 10-year policy.
When it comes to national security, you have said that the lack of security at the border is actually America's greatest threat. So what do you plan on doing about this?
I think people won't attack our country in a conventional manner. We have to be prepared for that too, but I think they'll do it in a non-conventional manner, such as car bombs and things like that. And I think we have to protect our borders and our airports, and I don't think we're doing a very good job. I mean, recently, the bomber that came in, they called the underwear bomber, he met the very profile of terrorism. We still let him in. I know in Russia you've got the same problems with terrorists. But the thing is that he bought a one-way ticket, he paid cash and had no bags, and we still let him in. His dad even tried to turn him in at the embassy, and we still let him in. He'd been traveling to Yemen, a lot of red flags, and we still let him in. And then we had a bomber 2 weeks ago where fortunately the bomb didn't go off, but in downtown New York, and he was on the no-fly list, and he got on the plane. And he was about to leave. We got lucky, I think, in stopping him. But my question, if he was on the no-fly list, why didn't someone go over to Connecticut and knock on his door and get a warrant from a judge and find out if he was a threat? How did he get to be on the no-fly list? And how did he get on a plane if he was on the no-fly list? There's a lot of questions about, after hundreds of billions of dollars spent, are we doing a good enough job protecting our citizenry from terrorism?
You also talk about an underground electrical fence. What is that about?
Well, I think that would be one way, and I've recently been talking also more about satellite observation. They say you can sit out in front of the store here with a newspaper, and a satellite can read the headline on your newspaper. So I think you could also monitor your border with satellites, and then you just have to have some means of intercepting people who come in illegally. You could have helicopter stations positioned every couple hundred miles, and I think you could patrol your borders and control your borders within months if you had the willpower to do it. And I think neither party in our country has had the willpower to control our borders.
Why not?
I don't know. Some of it may be labor force, things like that. But I'm not opposed to letting people come in and work and labor in our country. But I think what we should do is we shouldn't provide an easy route to citizenship. A lot of this is about demographics. If you look at new immigrants from Mexico, they register 3-to-1 Democrat. So the Democrat Party's for easy citizenship and for allowing them to vote. I think we need to readdress that. We're the only country I know of that allows people to come in illegally, have a baby, and then that baby becomes a citizen. And I think that should stop also.
Now, you're actually a proponent of the United States not funding, not joining organizations like the IMF, like the World Bank, like the United Nations. In this world of globalization, how do you really see this?
Right. Well, I think we should have diplomacy. And so I'm not don't have a problem with being part of international groups that talk with each other. What I don't like is that we pay for all of them. Like the UN, we foot the bill for maybe a third to a half of the UN, and then you have petty dictators like Hugo Chavez or Robert Mugabe, Evo Morales, who then go, or Gaddafi from Libya, who go to the UN and just bash the United States, and we're paying for their room, basically. We're paying for their microphone.
But at the same time, then, the United States has a bigger say about what goes on at the United Nations.
Right, you could say that, like on the Security Council, Russia, China, the United States get a bigger say in it, but we still put up with a lot of, I think, crazy over-the-top rhetoric from some of these third-world dictators that I'm not in favor of paying to let them bash America. Also, I don't want the UN to be fighting wars, in the sense that I don't like the idea of having armies under United Nations control. I think armies should be under the control of various nations. But at the same time, I like diplomacy. I think it's great